Breaking news. A megachurch pastor decided that 11 books do not belong in the Bible. First, I'll tell you the New Testament books, then I'll tell you the Old Testament books, and then I'll give you his name. So this pastor says the book of Revelations, the book of Hebrews, the book of Jude, and the book of James are not inspired by God and should not be in the Bible. In fact, he goes on and prints Bibles for his churches without those books, along with 7 books in the Old Testament, which I'll name shortly. So the reason he says these books don't belong in the Bible, he says they're not inspired. The book he really dislikes the most is the book of James. And he says for this reason, he knows it's a book of straw, like basically a book of crap, is what he's saying. He's trying to say it without cursing, I guess. But this is the verse in particular he hates in the book of James. But the whole book he despises. But this one really gets into his under his skin. James chapter 2, verse 24. You see that a man is justified by works and not by faith alone. So he said that contradicts his favorite verse in the Bible, Romans 3:28. For we hold that a man is justified by faith apart from works of the law. So what does he do? He takes out that book and then he adds a word to this verse. He actually adds the word alone. So in his Bible it says, for we hold that a man is justified by faith alone apart from works of the law. So not only is he taking books out of the Bible, he's adding to the Bible too. And this guy has a lot of followers. Trust me, this guy is huge. Okay? So the reason he said he's taking out the Old Testament books, the 7 books out of the Old Testament, is because the first century Jews didn't recognize them. So he admits that Jesus and the apostles read from the Septuagint. That's a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. And in the Greek Septuagint, those 7 books were there, and Jesus and the apostles actually quoted from them. But during the first century, there were a handful of Jews, like 6 or 7 of them, that hated the Christians. So they had a council, the Council of Jeremiah, where they decided that these books don't belong in the Bible. At this point, the Hebrew canon wasn't finalized yet. So they finalized it without these 7 books. Okay? The problem with that, there's several problems with that. The problem with that is this pastor is an anti-Semite. Okay? He has a book written, The Jews and Their Lives. You can Google it on Amazon and get it. You can see I'm not making this up. And this pastor says that we should burn the Jewish synagogues to the ground, and then whatever left, bury them with dirt. We should destroy every Jew's home and make them our slaves. I mean, this guy's a radical anti-Semite. Okay? So, I don't think he really respected the Jewish people that much to take their words over Jesus and the apostles. And in fact, recently scholars and archaeologists have found older manuscripts of the Hebrew Bible, older manuscripts, older translation than the one that Martin Luther was talking about. And they have those 7 books. You see, because the Septuagint was translated from the oldest Jewish manuscripts there are into the Greek, because the Greek was what the world spoke at the time. So, turns out, lo and behold, Jesus knew more than this pastor, that was the right Old Testament they were reading from. Now, who is this pastor? Drum roll, please. Martin Luther, and the year was 1534. Now, I presented it in that way because we just accepted that Martin Luther knew what he was doing, that the Bible, especially when I was an evangelical Protestant, I believed, Martin Luther was smart. He restored the church and restored the Bible to the books it should have been. But who is this man? You need to study this man. Who is this man who made this decision? For 1,500 years, the church had all these books in the Bible. And you say, well, the Protestant New Testament has the book of James, Revelation, Hebrews, and Jude. Thank God the other reformers put it back in. And even Martin Luther put it back in his Bible, but he has a footnote saying, up to this point, we were reading books that were inspired. So in other words, these other books aren't inspired. So even though he put it back in his Bible, he still didn't recognize that they were inspired by God. Okay, that's 11 books. Now, if I was one of these Bible numerology guys, I'd be a little concerned because The Catholic Bible has 73 books. 7 is the number of God, and 3 is the number of the Trinity. And the Protestant Bible has 66 books. 6 is the number of man, and 666 is the number of the beast. So, but I really don't get into numerology. That can get you in trouble. So anybody can interpret numbers any way they want, but numbers do have meanings. So it's just something to think about. But why does the Catholic Bible have 73 books? Well, the church decided at the Council of Rome in 382, the Council of Hippo 386, and the Council of Carthage 397 AD, which books should be allowed to be read in the church. Because unlike today, where people talk about how to be healthy, wealthy, happy, and wise in church, the church for centuries just read the Bible and talked about what the Bible meant, okay? So when they said these books were allowed to be read in church, these books are inspired by God, that was giving these books authority equal to the Bible, okay? And then they finalized the canon in 397 AD at the Council of Carthage, and it had the 73 books, okay? As a Protestant evangelical, I always thought that I didn't even know that Martin Luther took the New Testament books. I'm sure that's a shock to a lot of you guys. That was a shock to me when I recently found that out. But I always assumed, because I was taught and I looked and seen the Catholic Church in the Council of Trent, a few years after Martin Luther printed his first Bible, showed the list of books in the Bible, and it showed those 7 books. So Protestant evangelicals say, see, they added these 7 books. But all they were doing was reaffirming what the church always recognized for 1,500 years. Okay? So another problem is, as Devin Rose, in a great book I highly recommend, The Protestant Dilemma, says, Protestants have a dilemma because Jesus said that the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. Let me just read that really quickly to you. It's Matthew chapter 16. We'll do verses 17 and 18. And Jesus answered him, Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So Jesus is telling Simon, I'm changing your name to Peter, which means the rock. So he says, you are now the rock, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail. So Martin Luther is saying the gates of hell prevailed, and the church added books it shouldn't have added. The church went into apostasy, so he had to reform it. So either Martin Luther is right, the gates of hell prevailed, or Jesus is right, the gates of hell will never prevail. And you'll say, well, there were a lot of popes that were far less than perfect. They were quite evil. And there were some in the Middle Ages that were. But Jesus still protected the church. The church's doctrine has never changed. The church's doctrine has always stayed pure. The church's doctrine has never been heretical. The Catholic Church established the doctrine of the Trinity. They established that Jesus was God. Everything you evangelicals call the essentials of the faith, the Catholic Church has established, okay? Well before the Bible was even finished in 397 AD, okay? So that's the claim of the Catholic Church. And Peter was less than perfect, obviously. So God didn't pick perfect popes, and we have a list of popes from Peter to now. You know, Peter was the first pope, then Linus, then Cletus, then Clement, and actually Peter wanted Clement to succeed him. But when Peter died, the church voted, the bishops of the church, like they do today, voted for Linus. And then eventually Clement when he was older. They always went with older guys, I think. So the point is, there's always been a chain of authority. The Pope being like the president, and then the bishops, the magisterium is what we call in the Catholic Church, kind of being like the Congress, and the Bible kind of being like the Constitution. So we have 3 pillars, okay? In fact, speaking of pillars, Paul writes in 1 Timothy to Timothy, the church is the pillar of truth. The church is the pillar of truth. So again, if you're a Bible-believing Christian, if you believe the Bible, then you have another dilemma, okay? If the church is the pillar of truth, then the church was wrong. God allowed the church to be wrong for 1,500 years. Come on, all right? It's no different than the cults. The Mormons say that the church went into apostasy after the last apostle died. Jehovah's Witnesses say the same thing. So Joseph Smith in 1800 makes his own book, the Book of Mormons. Jehovah's Witnesses has 4 high school graduates with no college, no Hebrew, no Greek experience, translate the Bible. All they did was take the King James and make the New World Version and just add what they believed to it, okay? So what's the difference? Martin Luther, 1500, says the church went in apostasy. Difference is he didn't say he was a prophet like the other 2 cults. That's why Protestants aren't cults, but that's a different story. But he took the authority from the church and said, this is the Bible. So anyway, just think about that. If that happened today, if a Christian pastor, and I called Martin Luther a Christian because he believed in the essentials, and my Protestant evangelical brothers believe in the essentials of faith, Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, Jesus is God. They're Christian brothers and sisters. But so if a Christian, a true Christian pastor today decided to take out those 4 books out of the New Testament, come on, who would follow them? But we just blindly follow. You know, I did it for 30 years as an evangelical. So research this, look up the councils, the early church councils, Council of Rome, Hippo, Carthage, and you'll see. You can go right to Wikipedia right now when this video is over, and they'll list the 73 books that are in the Catholic Bible. Okay, so there you have it. Sorry if it seemed a little misleading. I think most of you knew where I was going with it. Some of you who didn't, I hope I enlightened you. And my evangelical brothers, I hope you search for the truth, because the truth will set you free. God bless.